say like if someone identifies as a dragon, that they're also sexually attracted to dragons, and also that in sexual romantic context they would like to be treated as a dragon. It's the same phenomenon I'm experiencing, but with being a different type of thing. Like I just want to be a woman, which is as vanilla as it gets. Like that's tame. It's not. And actually, after I learned a lot about otherkin, I was a little envious of how cool their identities were in comparison. It's like, what, you're like an alien and a dragon and an elf? Like, that's so cool. I just want to be a woman. Like, it's like, it's so basic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Cordial Curiosity. I'm Reed, and this is Nathan and Phil. What's up, you guys?
Hey, what's up? You can get my channel at Abstract Activist. And then Phil.
I'm Phil Illy. You can find me on Twitter at Autogynephilia and Substack, phililly.substack.com and autohetbook.com for the book.
Yeah, autogynephilic. Yes, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Like, what are we going to be talking about?
We're going to talk about gender stuff, specifically the most common cause of transgenderism, hopefully.
That's the central question. What is the most common cause of transgenderism?
Well,
the primary cause?
As for like which question for us to address?
Yeah, what we can address many questions, I'm assuming. Let's just get them out there just to give people a heads up where we'll be going.
Yeah, we can examine like my justification for holding various gender beliefs.
All right. Okay. What are the main contentious claims around gender at this point in time?
So that there's two distinct types of gender dysphoria, two distinct types of transgender identity, and that both of these distinct types of gender variance and dysphoria and identity are they're caused by sexual orientations, or they're like very strongly associated with them, such that there seems to be two main clusters of people that comprise basically the entire transgender population.
Two main clusters of the transgender population. Okay. What are those two main clusters?
So the one that most people will be familiar with is the homosexual one, where say you have like a masculine lesbian or a feminine gay man they're both like naturally gender nonconforming, often from a young age, and they don't fit into the social roles associated with their sex, and they find it hard to find sexual partners. And so some of them transition to live in a cross-gender sex role, which then, since they started out homosexual, this makes them slot into heteronormative society quite well. And they basically fit into the heterosexual social role at that point. So that's one type. The other type is what I call autoheterosexual, which is when you're attracted to being the other sex. Auto just means self, so it's just like attracted to self as the other sex. And it makes you attached to being the other sex because that's part of how orientations work, where like it starts out with, the more overtly sexual aspects, but then becomes about the feely-feels and the warm fuzzies over time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So one is more about fitting in with some cultural social roles, and the other is mainly about fulfilling some kind of sexuality preference? Or is it a mix of both?
I'd say the homosexual one is like, it's more concerned with fitting into society because it's more common in more collectivist Asian countries, whereas in the West, with our individualism and our freedoms, America number one, basically we the auto-heterosexual type transitions more often in the West, because they have a very strong inner feeling that they want to be this thing and that their life will have more meaning if they're this thing. It's basically, it's a very individual pursuit about living out their best life. And so it's more about what they need as an individual.
Gotcha. You have any questions, Nathan?
Well, I mostly just wanted to set the stage as to why I'm here, even at all.
Because you're charismatic and handsome.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's more like Phil and I have been like going to a lot of the same festivals, and then like I've been doing SE at festivals, and then I'm very fascinated with ideology and belief and politics and philosophy and all that stuff, and like you find friends in the weirdest ways doing conversations like this. And I observed Phil and his fantastic hooping and your acrobatics and stuff, and you won competitions and things. I always saw you from afar, and then I was doing my SE related stuff, and then came across your beliefs, and it was like the first time I was like, oh my gosh, this might be too hot for me to publish. Like I have a 3-hour recorded talk with Phil, and played it back, and I was like, I don't know if I asked the right question, and you listened back, because I always share my especially if they're friends, like I'll send them my interview and be like, let's listen to this together and see if we want to publish it.
It helps a lot to listen to it.
Yeah, and that's another reason I do it. It's another opportunity to reflect. Let's try to be coherent and explain our views as reasonably and rationally as we can, and see where we're misaligning, or if we're maybe not explaining something correctly, or let's find a way to explain it better. Let's be better advocates for what we believe, and let's not be afraid to share what we want to share. And I was afraid to publish it. And then I was also like, it was hard for me to listen to also.
Because I said like 500 times?
Well, no, it isn't so much about that. It was more like, the more a belief is associated with identity, the more difficult and personal it becomes, because the more, if you try to phrase a new worldview or a new way to look at things in the form of identity, the more opportunities you have to feel like you're alienating or othering either a group of people or other people. And I'm trying, like, my mission in life is to show how we're not so different in our mindset. Like, or not even really so much a mission. It's more like, I want to have meaningful and productive, enjoyable conversations with people that bring people in to SE, and to promote a more effective way of communicating. And I was like, almost kind of afraid, like, would this hurt or hinder it? And then I see you at these festivals, and there are certain friends that I love dearly who are not listening to you at all. And I've seen some confrontational moments where people, I just wanted them to open up a bit more and ask questions and be more curious and put the burden of curiosity on themselves when they talk to you.
Good luck.
And I was like, well, I want to do that for Phil. So then we started talking, and then I recognized that, wow, Phil's got like a Vulcan mind, and he's like super smart. And we did the SE survey and all this other stuff. And so we found common ground in that. And so I'm interested in like talking with Phil. So I just think that Phil's story was fantastic. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring him to you, Reed, and maybe to Peter as well, and just anybody who's interested in that sort of topic. And so that's the reason why I'm here, to set the stage there.
Thanks for being a friend, Nathan.
Yeah, hey, nice.
Yeah,
likewise.
The transgender issue for me, just the topic in general, there's so many overlaps of different areas of interest for me. There's the epistemology behind it. There's the psychology of belief. There's the scientific, like evolutionary almost denialism part of some of it. There's like the activism of trans activists and the illiberalism of some activists happening in society, which I have a problem with.
And can you expand on how it's illiberal?
The shutting down of discussion and the canceling of people who even attempt to, I assume, say the same kind of things that you might be saying or have already said in this conversation already. There's...
like the two types thing?
Yeah, is that a taboo?
Yeah, it's taboo to say that there's discrete types of trans. Like when someone tells me about their trans friend, I ask which type are they, and they're like, I don't want to talk about it.
Where do you think that comes from?
They're scared of saying the wrong thing and losing their friends, I think.
Where does the taboo of the wrong thing come from?
We've had 10 years of social media and we've seen what happens when you say the wrong thing.
Okay. Where did the taboo come from though? Like is it the social media picked up this taboo from somewhere? I have hypotheses about that, but do you have any idea?
With like the trans issue in particular? I think the taboo is that there's this foundational belief in mainstream transgenderism that's represented by the claims trans men are men, trans women are women, these thought terminating cliches. They're the beginning and end of any of ideological analysis in mainstream transgenderism. And if you say things that can be seen as conflicting with those sacred beliefs, then it is perceived as a threat. And you can then be perceived as an enemy and someone that needs to be separated and ostracized to protect this marginalized group.
Okay. Yeah, it's a sacred belief. That's a psychology belief term that's interesting to me. It seems to be sacred when I see that questioned. I've done the Spectrum AC stuff with Peter at University of Oregon. That claim was questioned and huge backlash there. At Portland, that was also we did the there are only two genders claim, and
that's a fun one.
That was a fun, and there was a backlash to that.
Which, by the way, there is a SE community breakdown of that video, which if this ever gets published, I'll probably put a link in the comments for it. Because we did tear it apart. There were better ways to do it even more SE, as there always is. And I think it still could have been handled a little bit better.
Yeah.
But yeah, it also was an interesting moment where people were saying that there were certain questions that were harmful.
Yeah.
And if certain questions can't be asked on a university campus, then where can you ask them? And isn't that the place where ideas are challenged respectfully? Especially if it was in the public area, outside of the building, with signs and stuff to draw people in. How else are you supposed to draw people in? Anyway, I highly recommend you watch the review of that.
So all these various areas of overlap. I'm interested in the science of it because I care about what is, and also care about the values of the political stuff happening with it, of what should be. And I'm interested in this, the strategies attempting to get to what should be. And I'm seeing a lot of illiberal strategies trying to force a kind of conformity to some even, unideal, goals of where we should be with this topic. What would you like to talk about? The science?
I usually like starting with the is.
The is, yeah.
Because if you start with the ought before agreeing on the is, then that leads to a lot of talking past each other and a lot of basically no one's on the same wavelength, but they have very strong feelings about how things should be, but there's no agreement.
Yeah, even talking about, trying to understand this question through science. Is that an issue, as some people bring up, I've heard, but we can talk about the science.
You mean in the sense that some people contest that it can be answered with science?
That even science itself is the mechanism to understand it, the framework.
Oh. I mean, I personally believe science is the least bad method of arriving at knowledge.
Okay,
yeah. Least bad. I love that.
That's the safest way to say it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Find me a better one and then we'll talk.
That's a good way to put it.
For now.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into the science then. What are the main things people should know about this scientifically? Maybe they don't know already, or maybe the highlights.
That
you mentioned already the two categories,
right? Yeah, and the two categories were scientists really started to hone in on those two types in the 70s, early 80s. They they were looking at transsexuals, trying to figure out where does this come from, and they're like, well, it seems like a lot of them are transvestites, and a lot of them are effeminate homosexuals, and like it's hard to tell, like how can we tell these apart from the transsexuals, you know? And so scientists were just trying to figure out what they were even seeing in their clinic, because it's so confusing. And the effeminate homosexual type, that was like, there's never been doubt about the existence of that one. That one's, it's obvious. And when you explain it to people, they're like, yep, that makes sense. But the more common type, the autoheterosexual type, which is autogynephilia and autoandrophilia, that one it's arguably like more diverse in a way where it has so many different presentations. Any given individual that has orientation can have it manifest in such different ways, and so it seems like there's this immense like rainbow of completely different people that are not ultimately of the same category, but they are actually like the same fundamental condition is causing it, the autosexual mechanism that makes you attracted to being something.
Okay. Is this a good point to share your personal part of this?
Yeah, I'm autogynephilic, which means sexually attracted to being a woman. I'm actually dressed way less transvestically than normal right now.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Nathan knows. It's too hot today to dress cute. Too hot
It was
for
like almost 90 today.
Yeah, I was not about to dress cute in that weather. Yeah. But you know, but yeah, I found out I had this orientation. I had no idea. And I found out at age 31, because I'd been dating someone, and we had a couple conversations about sex, gender, and transgenderism. And she was very much in the, I didn't know what it was at the time, but she was woke. And, you know, I would say like, it's not possible to change sex. You know, I didn't tell her, but like in my mind, I'm thinking like, yeah, duh, I wish I was a woman, but like, you know, I know that's not possible. So I'm thinking like, yeah, no shit, you can't change sex. But she was very offended by this. And after the dissolution of that relationship, I was wondering, am I bad? Am I wrong? Like, do I have a wrong opinion here? And so I went to the library and got transsexualism books out. And one or two of them actually mentioned the real cause, which most of them don't even mention the cause. And so, yeah, I found out at like age 31 that I have this sexual orientation I'd never heard of. And that is apparently the most controversial thing among trans people, because they don't like how it makes them feel. And it has been presented to them in a way that does not fairly represent what the science says about it. They're presented like a caricature version of it that they can easily reject, basically a straw man. The trans people present a straw man version of this theory to each other so that they can all collectively decide not to believe it.
How do you do that? What's the straw man argument that's usually given? Let's relate to them for a minute, just to air that out. Like, how do they present it usually?
That it's a transphobic theory, that's pseudoscience made by transphobic scientists that like really just wants to sleep with trans women. And these cisgender scientists can't possibly know what it's like to be trans. And so who are they to even say what it is? And they, oh my God, it's so hard for me to imagine their position because I've been so stuck in the scientific one for so long. This is good that y'all are bringing this up. I need to practice that. Yeah, basically they tell each other that the theory just portrays transgenderism as a sex-crazed mental illness where they're just pretending to be women for the purpose of seeking sexual arousal. And so they portray it to each other as an arousal thing and a getting off thing instead of a love thing and an attachment thing, which is sort of, I choose to talk about it more in the holistic feely sense. But yeah, they present it to each other like, what could these cisgender scientists even know? And they just made up this theory because they wanted to marginalize trans people and portray them as mentally ill.
Yeah, is it a mental illness?
The suffering
Hmm.
is categorized as a mental illness, the dysphoria.
Hmm.
It's categorized as a mental disorder, but that is so that third-party insurance can pay for it. Because there's also this other element of the trans movement where you don't want to define transness in terms of gender dysphoria. You define it in terms of identity.
Gender identity.
Yeah,
And that's that's not the scientific way of categorizing or understanding it. It's a different way.
well, the scientists categorize it based on addressing suffering. Based on there's this psychological suffering that some people feel about their gendered traits, and so the scientists have these diagnostic categories so that people can get hormones and surgeries with third payer insurance, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to get them.
Through like, insurance providers
Yeah,
to be paid for by the healthcare industry.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, because most people can't afford out of pocket,
'Cause
like
it's-
penile inversion surgery and stuff like that. That's fancy stuff.
Okay.
Like transsexualism is like historically that's for like the richer ones, it still is for the richer ones in terms of like the results you can get. If you can pay a lot of really nice surgeons, you can have way better results than poor people.
Is there any utility in thinking in using the concept of gender identity in this at all?
It's a good proxy for sort of gauging the intensity of someone's feelings about being a particular gender. Yeah, sometimes I don't even like using the word gender just because people don't even like agree on a meaning or can't even define.
That is a fuzzy concept.
Yeah.
I've been able to get it down to one word though.
Okay, what is it?
So like if femininity is femaleness, which is qualities associated with females, and masculinity is maleness, which is qualities associated with males, then that means gender is sexness, qualities associated with a particular sex.
Sexness.
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 It's like the isness of sex. It's not sex itself, but it's like all the things associated with it and like surrounding it.
What are some of those things?
How people behave, how they dress, their social role. Those are some of the big ones. Their physical features in particular. Obviously there's things like their gonads and their genitals those are primary sexual characteristics.
Yeah, I've heard primary, secondary, and tertiary.
I'm not sure if there's tertiary.
I don't know. Okay.
There's at least like the primary ones, like you can categorize those as sex. And then when it comes to things like breasts or like waist to hip ratio or shoulder width, hand size, skull size, things like that, that's more in like the gender realm. Like it's related to sex, but it could be like decoupled from it.
Gotcha. Okay. And where should we go now? So we're talking about the science behind transgender. What else is there to know about it?
Just like demographically speaking, something I think is important to say is that most trans people in the US are of the autoheterosexual type, roughly 3 out of 4.
This is the autogynephilic.
Yeah, like autogynephilia. And yeah, I didn't specify that yet.
Yeah.
Autogynephilia is love of self as woman. That's what I have. That's male autoheterosexuality. Like when males are attracted to being the other sex, that's autogynephilia. And when females are attracted to being the other sex, when they're attracted to being a guy, and they like want to have like, a beard and a dick and all the good stuff. That's autoandrophilia, love of self as man. And a lot of them want to be gay men in particular.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the broad term that collects those together is autohetero.
Yeah, that's the term I use to collect both of those under the same umbrella.
Yeah, like I've never heard that term.
Exactly.
But that's the term like you go by on Twitter or something, or
Yeah. Well, my Twitter handle is autogynephilic. but that's only because the character limit is 15 and autoheterosexual is 16 characters.
Okay. You would have gone there.
Missed it.
Yeah,
by
I tried. I tried.
So you're a proponent of that concept being put out there more.
Yeah.
It seemed more clarifying.
It is very clarifying because Autogynephilia has terrible mouthfeel. It's not good. It's not a sexy word.
It has the word philia in it, which sounds like almost. It sounds like
Are you
phobia.
Oh, I thought you were going to name drop the most forbidden sexuality, but we won't name that one.
Oh no,
Not that one, no.
No, we shan't name that.
we shan't.
But yeah, philia just means love.
Oh,
My name is Phil.
oh okay.
It means love.
Oh, okay. Well, fancy that. I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that term. And you're saying the majority of trans people are in that category, not the gender dysphoria category.
Well, no, there's two different roads to gender dysphoria.
Oh.
2 roads to that town of suffering.
That
Yeah.
town of
Suffering
suffering.
town.
Yeah.
Would you say you suffer?
Sometimes. Yeah, I'm 6'4" and jacked.
And
women are not that.
And you want to be okay.
I have to laugh about it because it's like,
Yeah.
if I get sentimental, it would just bum me out.
Okay. The 2 roads to suffering.
Yeah.
And the majority is the autoheterosexual kind
Yeah.
versus what is the other category?
The homosexual.
The homosexual.
And what I like about
yeah, it's like from the very tail ends of the homosexual.
right,
thing.
yeah, like the right tails of homosexuality. That's homosexual transsexualism.
Yeah.
And then when you have strong autoheterosexuality, that leads to autoheterosexual transsexualism. And there's these 2 different conditions that are being put under the trans umbrella, but they're 2 fundamentally different situations that are happening.
Okay. How do you know how many people are in each category?
Because if one of the types is homosexual, and these are people that are very homosexual, that means they're never going to have, they're going to have lifelong same-sex attraction. They're not going to waver in that. And so any trans person that has a sexual orientation that deviates from that is of a different type. And since there's 2 known types, that means basically if they have a non-homosexual orientation, which means heterosexual, bisexual, or asexual with respect to the birth sex, then they can be categorized as autoheterosexual.
Okay. And when the switch happens, the homosexual kind of turns straight. Socially.
Yeah, they slot into heteronormative society. That's like the traditional vision of it.
Yeah. And for you and other heterosexuals, when they switch, it appears gay, potentially.
Right, yeah, they become like trans lesbians and like gay trans men and stuff. Yeah.
Trans lesbians.
Yeah, transbians is the portmanteau that the trans community uses for that.
Transbians.
Yeah, like if I were to transition, I'd be for sure a transbian. Yeah.
Because you would be male attracted to females.
Because I'd be like, in that female gender identity and then liking women.
The female gender identity attracted to women.
Yeah.
Trans lesbian.
Yeah. Yeah, we usually call it transbian.
Transbian.
I know you're probably not that plugged into the gender scene where you're like, oh yeah, transbians, and there's so much slang.
Yeah.
Gender stuff.
Okay.
But just 2 types. It's really amazing.
So how do you know how many are in each category? Are these studies for this? How well is this studied? It seems fairly recent in just like the past couple decades, or 50 years at least.
Yeah. So there was a scientist, he's still alive and he's still dope. Ray Blanchard did some amazing studies in the 80s. He worked at a gender clinic in Toronto. It was the only gender clinic because they have universal health care there. So they had this one state-sponsored clinic in Toronto. And this was the 80s. And so this is when they started having computer databases, really fancy stuff. And then they could actually start running statistical analyses. And so he worked at a clinic where they had the typology problem, which is where they're trying to figure out how many types of trans there are. And he did a bunch of basically, he did a series of 3 empirical studies. In the first one, he asked, basically during intake at this gender clinic, they handed them questionnaires to fill out, and then they entered that into a database. And then the studies were done with this database of like questionnaires filled out during intake. And so for any of the patients that filled out that they had felt like the other gender for at all times for at least a year straight, they were counted as transsexual and included in these studies. And the first study he did, he basically just tallied up. There was a question. One of the questions asked was something like, have you ever put on women's clothes and become aroused? It's asking about, have you ever in your life wore women's clothes and become aroused? And he added up the percentages of the male to female transsexuals that of different orientations that answered this question. He added up the homosexuals and the bisexuals and the asexuals and the heterosexuals, and he compared the percentages between these groups, and he found that the homosexual group, 15% of them said that they had ever been aroused by cross-dressing, whereas all the non-homosexual groups, like put together, merged into one, 73% of them said that they had been aroused by cross-dressing. And so you have these hugely different disparities. One set of groups is 73% say, yes, I've been aroused by cross-dressing, and then this other group, only 15% say that. And so you don't even need to do fancy inferential statistics or anything. You can just see the size of these different bar charts, and it just jumps out as like there's something different going on with these non-homosexual groups. To have this, it's a quite curious trait to have that sort of response to wearing very good clothing.
Very fine,
very fashionable, good clothing.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's just a fascinating quirk of human nature. Interesting to study.
So why is this controversial?
Yeah.
Because it conflicts with people's beloved self-image.
How so?
Because if you're attracted to being the other sex, you'd become attached to the idea of being the other sex.
Actually being the other sex.
I say other sex just for category stability, but we could say other gender too. You want any traits you associate with the other gender, the other sex. You want all of it for yourself. Any of it. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, if I could have my voice be higher, that'd be dope. If I could be shorter, that'd be sick. If I could have more of my scalp hair left, that'd be sick nasty. Yeah, basically, there's a lot of there's a lot of great traits that I could have. Like, if they were feminine, my brain would just perceive them as good. Like, female, feminine, just literally good. Like, it's obviously better, like, to my brain.
Better to your brain. Like having the traits.
Yeah, they're desirable. That basically anything that you find attractive on a woman, you want for yourself.
Would it be fair to say that it's like the feeling you get of being seen that way?
Being seen one way is one way of doing it, like a social thing. Interpersonal autogynephilia is part of it. For me personally, that's not too much because of my skeletal situation. But like for other people, that's more of a thing for them.
Skeletal situation.
Yeah, I drew short straw in the skeletal lottery. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Is this sort of thing allowed to be written about in like psych textbooks and stuff?
I gotta say I haven't really looked at many psych textbooks, and part on this, and part of it is just that I don't think they're teaching it in schools. I think it might have been mentioned in textbooks like 10 or 15 years ago, but any written now would have been purged by now.
When I was in college, like I graduated 2009, and I was originally a psych major, and I remember like we covered transsexual issues and that whole body of information in psych class very briefly, and then it ended with like a lot of the things that we determined were real were protested, and now we don't talk about them or don't like have them in the book anymore. And then they just moved
they
on
said that
in the book, in the textbook.
Yeah,
For my
okay.
in
So
my
yeah,
psych class.
sounds like that textbook used to have true stuff in it, and it got removed for political reasons.
Well, they like mentioned what it used used to be in
what
there.
did it used to say?
I honestly, this was like more than a decade ago, so
Right, yeah, I know
wanna
this is
misquote
hazy
it.
upon hazy, but
Right,
do you remember
right.
any?
I do remember seeing pictures of protests and stuff like in the textbook, along with like what used, and I thought it was autogynephilia. I thought it wrote about that in the book.
No, that was absolutely a thing. The transsexuals went after Bailey for that. A scientist, J. Michael Bailey, he wrote a book called The Man Who Would Be Queen, and the last third of it talked autogynephilia was included, and these transsexual college professors, they all colluded to try to destroy his reputation and just cause him immense social damage to scare anyone away from talking about it. And so since then, since 2003, people have been scared if they want to keep their job. And they're working in colleges, they can't outright tell. If they were to tell their students there's two types of trans, here's what they are, they'd probably get fired, my guess. And I know I've had friends that are therapists, and I tell them about this, and then I also tell them you can't tell the patient about this because you might risk your license.
Oh wow.
So,
Yeah.
it's a weird situation where like the clinicians would be risking their ability to keep their jobs if they told the truth to their patients.
What do you advise we do to overcome that kind of repression of ideas?
I think it's just going to take, we need to have the people that have this orientation own it and just say, yeah, that's what I have going on. And it's fine to be this way. But I'd like to be honest about it and just say what it is, so that not only I can understand myself better, but so that other people can understand me better.
And you would say you're not actually the other sex, and that seems to be taboo?
Yeah.
People want to be the other sex.
Yeah.
And this way of thinking about it, using biology and science to understand it, gets away from that?
Yeah, because it's not possible to change sex. So, like when someone is born male that says, I identify as female, I'm biologically female, that is a statement that it's an accurate reflection of their beliefs, but it doesn't map onto their corporeal reality. And, there are people that literally identify as the other sex. And some just use gendered words, like say someone's born male, identifies as a woman. There's contention about whether woman is defined based on sex or gender. I like to avoid that discussion because it gets nowhere. So that's why I use the sex terms like male and female, because those are stable and they're not social constructs no matter what. Like, I don't think science is ever going to find that, oh, wait, we were wrong, there aren't two sexes. Like, I think that's something that's, like, pretty dialed in at this point.
Mm-hmm. And I hear people bring up intersex to try to muddy the waters between the sex binary.
Right, yeah. And that's to, by blurring the boundaries, it helps them deconstruct the binary. It's this technique, I think, that was innovated in, like, post-structuralism. I can't remember all my...
A literary theory, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So just to speak up for them for a minute,
Yes,
do those people exist?
Which people?
Intersex people?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But
are any of those people not male or female?
No.
They're all either male or female.
Yeah, because male and female are based on gametes. Whether you make the small ones that squiggle and move around, or you make the big ones that just sort of sit around.
Sorry, I'm laughing. I just
That's-
love the way you describe things sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, I could say biology wise and say like the small motile gametes, or I could say like big egg that just sits on its ass and waits for the little swimmy swimmers to come to it. Like there's those two different types.
Yeah. So when people bring up intersex to try to blur these boundaries, it doesn't work.
It's irrelevant to the question of transgenderism.
It's irrelevant.
It's being used politically for transgenderism because they want to integrate trans people into society. That's their goal. And I would like to do that too. With science.
With science.
With science instead of with woo.
With science instead of with woo.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And that's why I like the scientific model, because basically if someone has gender issues and they're wondering why they feel the way they do about their gender, this tells them very quickly, based on their sexual preference for men, women, both, or neither, very quickly you can get a strong guess
Doggos.
as about like what type they are. And so, yeah, instead of someone going through a bunch of painful, confusing introspection, they can just quickly figure out, oh, there's two conditions here. I'm this one, and then figure out this is how this one works. Let me understand that so I can understand myself. That's what I want to implement.
It's hard to seek out more information, potential remedies, potential further educational avenues to go down if you don't know how to put a label on what it is. And I'm hearing you say it's like difficult for a lot of people to put a label on where they're at.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because there's just, you know, like with the alphabet soup of letters, one of the letters is Q for questioning,
Okay, yeah.
right? And that's for like that early phase where
And
people...
not for QAnon.
It could
or
be.
queer. It's not for queer.
Queer is one of the Qs. Sometimes there's a second Q
Q-
for like
second
queer
Q.
questioning.
Oh,
You've seen versatile
Oh, right.
alphabets.
The questioning is
The LGBTQIA plus 2S,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
What does the word queer mean to you?
So I define queer as non-allo-heterosexual, which that sounds jargony, right?
Yeah.
I'll break that down for you.
Okay.
So allo-heterosexual, allo means other. Most people are allo-heterosexual, which is attracted to, they have heterosexual attraction to other people and to heterosexual bodies. And so to say that something is non-allo-heterosexual is to say it's a sexuality outside of that conventional heterosexuality. And as far as I can tell, if we restrict sexuality just to talking about gender, there's two types of queer. There's this heterosexual kind, this autoheterosexual kind. That's one type of queer. And then there's same-sex attraction. So there's cross-gender attraction, which is autoheterosexuality, and there's same-sex attraction, which is homosexuality and bisexuality. And so there's two types of queer. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Do you like how simple that is?
Simple.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
refreshing. isn't it?
You've massively summarized much more than what 4 years ago or 3 years ago at this point when we first
Right.
talked.
Yeah, when we 1st talked, I had not streamlined my messaging, but then I wrote a
Also, his
600-page
questions
book.
are almost always better than mine. So
Yeah.
there's that too.
I've heard a definition of queer as an identity without an essence, in more in the political terms.
Yeah. So that's like as part of queer theory,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Queer. So the queer theory definition of queer is it's like an identity you take on as a fight against normality itself. So they really are vague about whether it's a sexuality
Which
at that
anyone
point.
could be queer then, from any
As long
from
as
any
you're
sexuality.
against being normal.
Being normal.
Yeah. No, it's in queer theory, it's specifically about
Cis heteronormativity.
right. Yeah. There's that normativity they're trying to deconstruct, dismantle, disrupt, all the D's. You know, they love the D's.
I've had people literally call me queer just because I wear nail polish sometimes.
I've had various questions about like, you know,
Yeah.
I've categorized you in
Me
various
a lot.
ways in my head.
Yeah.
Like,
There's a lot of behaviors that I probably haven't shown the internet very much about.
right. Yeah, no, and when we were work colleagues before and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is queer theory scientific?
No, it's political. It's It's a liberationist. It's part of the broader liberationist, revolutionary, identity-based approach.
It's like, don't tell me how to dress.
It's.
It's a little more than that.
I mean, I'm in that camp. Like, don't tell me how to
Childish.
dress. I'm really big in the freedom of dress camp. Like,
Oh, for sure.
if I want to wear a dress, you can't stop me because freedom.
Hey, follow
That-
your dreams. Freedom.
Yeah. I'm really about freedom. Oh God, I got off
Me too,
track.
which is why I sometimes like wonder like why is there an issue with any of this? Is there what
Well, if cis-heteronormativity needs to be disrupted and dismantled, that's not liberty-minded. That's not live and let live, I assume.
Right. It's not. And so there's this clash where there's this critical theory approach that queer theory is one descendant of critical theory, where it's a critique of liberalism. And so they're trying to dismantle things like reasoning, rule of law, normality, order, things, free speech. They have to dismantle these things because there's a political goal they're trying to achieve.
what and yeah, I was perfect. You're heading in the right direction. I was
Yeah.
gonna ask, like, how are they doing that? Are they passing laws that do that?
It's mostly through cultural engineering. So this used to be called cultural Marxism.
Discourse engineering, yeah.
Right, yeah, discourse engineer. Yeah, that's I'm working towards being one of them. But like for science instead of woo. Cuz I mean, it sounds bad, but like if there's propagandists on one side, then there needs to be a counter propaganda to that is my way of thinking. But I know that the propaganda game is inherently corrupt itself, so I'm going to get muddy in the process, but yeah, in terms of like the queer theory you're asking about, there's queer, you can define queer in terms of that normality, the anti-normality stance taken from queer theory, or you can define queer in terms of sexuality. And since I mostly think in terms of sexology and human sexuality, I usually think of queer just as it means someone that is just not strictly normal heterosexual, that there's something else.
Yeah. But normal is bad.
It
as they
is.
say.
It's the queer theorists would say it's bad. I think normal
Yeah.
is good to have a stable culture in society. If there wasn't a normal to point to, then we'd be a bunch of weird atomized things that have no form or structure. It'd be really hard to like as much like I can't fit in a normal society, but I recognize that it's important that there are people like that. Even though I don't fit in with them.
Why is it important?
They're the ones that go to their jobs regularly and make stuff and get stuff done on time.
Okay.
Make the microphones and stuff.
Yeah. it's not
Well,
the,
I just wonder, like, how if I'm abnormal in a way that's sexual in nature, whether that's the way I want to feel inward or what I'm attracted to outwards, how does that affect my ability to make this microphone?
it doesn't.
Oh, okay.
But Reed was talking about like the queer, like political queer, not sex queer, I think.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm differentiating between those two things because
Okay.
they're very different things.
Right.
Because there's people that have these queer sexual orientations that politically are very opposed to queer theory because they see its downfalls. Namely, I would say the biggest flaw with critical theory is its epistemology, which may be something both of you know
And
about.
that's where we come
ask,
in.
ask questions about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like basically they have the deconstructing and dismantling. It's critical theory. It's called that because it's about critique. It's about pointing out the bad thing and removing it, and then with the thought that once you remove all the bad things, only the good will be left, and then profit. You know?
Like underpants gnomes.
Yeah, the underpants gnomes.
It's
yeah.
underpants gnomes theory.
Yeah, but with critique. But the positive epistemology within critical theories, they don't have something like science. Instead, they have narrative and storytelling. And what they call different ways of knowing, whereas like each culture has its own way of deciding what knowledge is, and there's no universalist approach, no type of knowledge system that can say other knowledge systems are wrong, and so it leads to this relativism.
And relativism between identity groups as well.
Right?
potentially.
Yeah, just relativism all around.
Yeah. And there's a hierarchy of these identity groups.
I mean, in terms of practicality with how it's played out, there is a hierarchy of importance, with intersectionality. Like someone that can claim a marginalized racial identity has more sway than someone that has a marginalized, like, say, like disability identity, obviously being...
I think you win on the intersectionality points right here, right now. if someone just saw an image of us,
Yeah.
I would assume that would be the analysis.
That they would assume what we would say.
They would assume you had the higher intersectionality points because of the way you're dressed and all that.
Well, I mean, this isn't...
This is pink now.
This, man, yeah, if you saw me any other day, oof, yeah.
Oh, even better.
Like dress, skirt, leg warmers, all the good stuff.
Usually the arm warmers.
Yeah,
are
the
thing
armbands.
that does it for me. I love that shit.
They're great. They're just thigh highs with the ends cut off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, if it wasn't warm in here, I'd be wearing some. But
So is that's that whole political side of this, which leads to the liberalism I'm also worried about from some queer theory activists, intersectionality activists. But we can think about all of this in terms of science and liberty.
I like
and
those.
That would be fine.
That would be great.
Yeah.
I would love that. I like freedom and I like true things.
Yeah. Let's just do that.
Sweet. Well, I guess I'm wondering, like, are people who are in opposition to what you might be saying, like, it's weird because, like, when people are, can you describe, like, an average confrontation that you have with some woke people?
See, like in person, it's fine.
Okay.
It's when there's a technological intermediary and you forget that there's a human on the other side of the computer that people
internet.
become absolute shitlords.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Keyboard warriors and stuff.
It's just, you've seen it.
Yeah.
You saw.
I've seen
Yeah.
it in person and online also because we
Yeah.
hang out. So, like, or,
Yeah.
from time to time. So,
Yeah. And it's.
how
Yeah,
are
no,
you
I-
most misunderstood?
People think that I'm saying people are trans just because they're fetishists, or that I'm saying they're not actually trans, that they're fetishists, or basically they feel that their identity is being delegitimized by the theory.
Okay. And can you steel man why they might feel that way?
Let's see. So is basically the theory I'm using was made up by transphobic quack doctors that just really wanted to remove trans people out of society, and so they just devised a theory to portray them as mentally ill and to
Is it
keep
the
them on the
label that
margins.
makes it seem mentally ill? What's wrong? Is it the labels like autogynephilia and all this stuff, or
Right, they don't like that label. Yeah.
All right, and why not? Because they think it's we are maybe I already asked that question with you earlier today, but it's just like they think that that's somehow dehumanizing, or it's not in line with how they're viewing themselves.
Yeah, it conflicts with their self-image. They're attached to a particular self-image, and this theory says that the only reason they have that self-image is because they're heterosexual of their birth sex, which is the least type of queer, is heterosexuality. And so it's like it can feel pretty invalidating at first in terms of their queerness.
Because it's not more unusual. It's more normal.
Right, it can seem more normal because it's a type of heterosexuality. But because they don't know that there's a queer type of heterosexuality and a homosexual type, that, yeah.
Maybe it's somewhat about also how it's more liberatory when it's something that they discover, like, you talked with that woman about just feeling the jolt of Jesus and the Holy
Earlier
Spirit
today.
inside them.
Right.
Yeah.
I hear some people who claim to be transgender having like some jolt of a gender identity in them, and they just know, like a gnosis. They know. It's not a scientific empirical theory that they fit into, based on like empirical stuff. It's an internal thing.
It's like
Who
a
are you to
eureka.
say?
It's a eureka.
Yeah,
it's
no,
not-
I had that moment like about a decade ago where I was on mushrooms, as one does. I think I mentioned this briefly other times. I was on mushrooms at a Lady Gaga concert. I cross-dressed, but like in a plausibly deniable way, like where I was wearing a kilt and like a men's shirt that technically men's, but like didn't look it, things like that. And I got this rush of gender euphoria, which is, I'll explain that in a bit, but like basically I just had this strong inner feeling. It felt like there was like this feminine spirit like welling up inside of me, that there was like a female soul in there. And it was like, holy shit, this is really intense. Because the first time these things happen, it's often intense. And it was very confusing to have that feeling. It felt really good. But then led to months of confusion. So was it worth it? I don't know. But but it felt really good. And yeah, it created this inner feeling of like there's like a woman inside of me. So like this orientation can create this inner sensation of having a woman inside of you.
And at that time in your life, did you have this scientific understanding of it?
No.
So you had...
I was very confused.
Okay.
I was just like, no, I cannot be trans. I'm 6'4". There's no way. No. No. Like, I was like, this is bad. And my first thought was it was bad just because of how I looked. Like if I was passy, like I would have been like, all right, let's try this out. But like,
Right.
I was like, oh no, this is not going to fly with people.
Right.
This was before the whole transcultural revolution. Like it was about to kick off like a year later or so.
What year was this?
2013.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, no, even after all the trans stuff became popular, I still had never heard about autogynephilia, even though it was what the source of my gender dysphoria, when I experienced it, and also explained why I thought women's clothes were better and why I thought women were literally better.
They're pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
It seems like a higher quality explanation than the gender soul.
Well, it explains where the gender soul feeling comes from.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't deny the fact that feeling exists.
It's an empirical attribution.
Right. It's something that I think it's a good explanation because there's people that feel that they have dragon souls inside of them, for instance. I love bringing up dragons as like the
Yeah,
coolest
that's a good
example of trans identity. Dragons are very cool, for the record.
Yeah, right. Dragons are rad.
All right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, we have agreement. Dragons are cool.
Have you seen that Rick and Morty episode? It's so true.
Right, yeah, like the soul bonding thing, they were
Soul
getting
bond.
down. Yeah. So there are people that identify as another species. They're often called otherkin. And a lot of them, if asked in surveys, they will say that they're sexually attracted to, say like if there's someone identifies as a dragon, that they're also sexually attracted to dragons. And also that in sexual romantic context, they would like to be treated as a dragon, like that. So it's the same phenomenon I'm experiencing, but with being a different type of thing. Like I just want to be a woman, which is as vanilla as it gets. Like that's tame. It's not. And actually, after I learned a lot about otherkin, I was a little envious of how cool their identities were in comparison. It's like, what, you're like an alien and a dragon and an elf? Like, that's so cool. I just want to be a woman. Like, it's so basic, like what I am in comparison.
Humans. We're silly.
Definitely.
And interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, I mean,
We got to ask the disconfirmation
Yeah.
criteria question.
Grill me, boys.
Yeah. I mean, I won't even bother with scales, I guess, at this point. Well, maybe I will. 1 to 10, or 0 to 10. 0 is no confidence. 10 is can't be mistaken.
Thank you for explaining this to me.
We've done it before. So, but I'm doing 1 to 10 now. That's instead of 1 to 100.
Yeah, a lot of people don't like that extra digit. Too complicated.
It's just
This is better for most people.
Yeah. I have reasons. I'll go into that later. But
What's your question?
yeah, how confident are you that pretty much what we've been talking about today is true and real?
we'll pick a specific.
Yeah, be more
I
specific.
know. Which one would you like to pick? Because it's your beliefs.
Let's see.
Yeah, if you could distill it
We
to
could
a
start
claim.
with the safest one. Like, autogynephilia exists.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm at like 99.99 on that.
Okay. What would make you more confident?
I don't need to be more confident.
Don't need to be.
I don't know.
What would make you? What would make you less confident? Is there a test that we could do? Some way we could challenge this idea that would, given a certain outcome, lower your confidence in it being true.
It's hard because I already have life experience being turned on by that stuff. And this is like, after hearing about the theory, I tried stuff I had never thought of before and it worked. And like, how are you going to argue with a boner?
Okay, yeah, I guess if it's being defined as just like the inner feelings.
Yeah, this is a personal identity claim and experiential claim.
Right.
It's hard to ask for disconfirmation criteria. You'd have to be like
It's
a,
not
a
about
brain in a vat type of situation.
right, because with usually the disconfirmation, that's more about external truths, right, in the external world. And I guess what we're talking about today is more of an internal, personal experience.
Well, I guess, yeah, in terms of external, like we could say, like, examine the question. Like, I have a claim that most trans people in the US are of this autoheterosexual ideology. And that one, I'd say 98% on.
Okay, that it's most people fit into that.
Most trans people,
Most trans people.
the cause of their gender dysphoria is attraction to being the other sex.
Above 50% is the most? Or what? Could you put a
Right,
percentage
yeah,
on
above
it?
50% is most, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is pretty lenient. Because I think it's about 3 out of 4. So there's like a lot. Like, I'm pretty confident.
Okay.
Sweet, that answers my questions, I guess.
And I assume just more empirical survey data or just more empirical research would change that?
Yeah, if they found more types. Like, if they found that there's an autism type that is... Because there's people have some ideas about, like, various rarer types. You know, like a schizophrenic type of someone that's just delusional and it's not connected to any of this other stuff. Or there's the social contagion hypothesis that's gotten popular in the last 5 or 6 years, that females, like teenage girls, are getting like caught up in the transgender craze and adopting trans identities. It's called rapid onset gender dysphoria is the name for it. It's basically the thesis that we're having this cultural moment right now, and it's sort of a social contagion, and so the idea of being trans is spreading to people that aren't that in another era would not be trans. You know, like, they're not homosexual, they're not autoheterosexual. There's something else behind their gender issues. So basically, if we could find evidence for more types, I would believe it if there was more.
What would be the best evidence for that third category, the social contagion?
I would say it would be good to... You'd find out, if you were to try to figure this out through surveys, you would ask them questions to try to see if they're any of the 2 known types. And then if they don't get slotted into those categories based on how they answer, then you'd put all those people together that don't fit and try to see if there's anything common between them that could be seen as like a third type of cause.
Okay.
basically rule out the two known types and then take the remaining people and see if what they have going on.
Okay. Okay.
Did you have anything else that we didn't ask? Is there a question we should have asked but didn't ask?
How would I know that?
If there's something that
Something
still is on your chest that you want to get off your chest, whether that's with the political movements, is there like
pronouns.
we could talk about that?
People love talking about that.
What's your position on all that?
I think it's a sign of societal progress that we've gotten to a point where we can use people's preferred pronouns. I don't think it's good to mandate that people use them. That can be done socially, but I guess when it's done by law, like if there's a legal mandate to have to use pronouns, that's compelled speech. And that goes against the free speech principle, which is the bedrock of all the other liberties. So I don't think there should be state sanctioned pronoun adherence, but I think it's nice that people are doing it.
Does there need to be some kind of criteria to take people seriously to use their pronouns, or does anyone can have any different kind of pronouns?
Are you saying like should people have to change their external appearance?
Should they need to pass, I guess, or like attempt to do it?
If they passed, you wouldn't even need to have the pronoun discussion.
Yeah, right.
This is for people that don't pass, right?
Right.
And
Oh wow, good point.
yeah, no, that's the thing is transsexualism existed for decades, and there's this bathroom discussion and pronouns. This is all about the people that don't pass, because the ones that pass, people don't notice them.
They just fit in and
They just fit into a pronoun. Yeah.
Fit into a pronoun, yeah.
They do.
And so so there's this issue where we have these people that want to be the other gender or want to be some sort of intermediary mix of the genders, like non-binary. And as a society, we're trying to figure out how do we integrate these people in a society in a way that accommodates their special needs while like also respecting other people's needs. And it's been quite a contentious thing over the last 10 years or so. And yeah, I hope it'll get a little more calm soon. That's why I want to get the science explanation out there, because right now, like Reed, you said, there's like this inner Gnosticism as the base. That's sort of like the epistemology of a lot of trans people, is they have this strong inner feeling, and that's just hard to measure and like objectively verify. And so that's very relevant for if we're talking about how to integrate these people into society. And yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
Do you think there will be any neuroscience about this at any point?
There already is some neuroscience. I'm not an expert on neuroscience. From what I've seen, the existing studies, when they do find that there's sort of brain structures in trans people that are shifted across gender and are a little more like the other gender, these studies have not controlled for sexual orientation, so they'll mix in the homosexuals and the non-homosexuals together.
Oh.
And so the thing is, with this homosexual type, you could partially think of it as like a brain localized intersex condition where this basically, you've heard of evolution, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So males and females have different optimal mating strategies, and that means there's different optimal psychologies for males and females to have.
Yeah.
And so when we're developing in the womb, our personalities are basically how our sexual orientation develops. It develops as part of a package deal with the rest of our psychological traits. And so for instance, if I was born homosexual instead, I would have, statistically speaking, been more feminine, on average, you know. There's always exceptions, but like on average, someone that's homosexual will have like a little cross-gender shift in terms of psychological traits. And so, yeah, when there's been neuroscience on transsexuals, they have not split the homosexuals separately, and then they keep finding, surprise, that they have, their brains are shifted a little more towards being like the other gender. And it's like, well, yeah, no shit, you didn't, like, there's two different conditions
You
here.
would hypothesize that would be more the homosexual kind?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, because it's more of an extreme tail thing.
Because it's just because the same-sex attraction, that it's just tied in with all those other psychological traits. Whereas like that conventional gender-based attraction is very tied into our psychology. And whereas sort of this autosexuality thing, it's more of like, I guess, neuroanatomically, it could be like portrayed more as like a glitch, or like, some little mechanism went slightly wrong, but it's not like this overarching, doesn't have huge impacts on all of your psychology in the same way that homosexuality could.
Gotcha. With pronouns for me,
Yeah, what's your pronouns, Reed? You didn't.
we
didn't do pronouns.
Usual pronouns you would assume.
We talked a little bit about this during our SE club meetup, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It depends on what mental model I'm supposed to be thinking about in terms of what a man and woman is. If I'm asked to use different pronouns for different people, am I expected to think you're actually a different sex? Do some people think that? Do some people request that I think that?
What if they just say, nope, you don't need to think, you can think whatever you want to think, but I just want to be, you want to say the words.
Well, saying the word should mean something.
What if they don't need it to mean anything for you, they only need it to mean something for them? This is a question.
Yeah. Then I don't know what to say to them.
See, like for me, like I mentioned a little bit of this earlier today while we were having dinner. Like if I meet somebody, and maybe you disagree with this, and maybe there's a knockdown argument for this, but if there's like, and maybe this isn't even a good analogy, I don't know. I'm just trying to spitball here, throwing spaghetti on the wall. I'm an idiot. I don't know anything. I'm just gonna disown everything I say.
That's safe. That's good.
Yeah. Like if somebody's like, I'm, Mother Mary, and I'm like a nun, like I'll just call her Mother Mary. I don't care if that's what she's wanting me to say. Like I am not religious at all. Like that's their title, I guess, that they want. So I'm like, it's just a sign of respect. If anything, it's going to help me broach a conversation with that person. I consider it like a rapport building kind of.
I mean, that example seems pretty easy, though. But
it
if
is.
I was
I'm
asking you
relating it to something that's less, some other thing that I don't have a problem with, even though I don't believe. In my head, I'm like, there's nothing about you that makes you more qualified than most other people. I mean, maybe on the Bible or something, but it's not more holy. But I'll still give you this title that you want. I don't see a problem with that, personally.
Right? Yeah, honoring
or
titles.
rabbi, whatever. Yeah, I'll just do that. I'll do that for them.
Yeah.
But maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. Is there a good argument why I shouldn't?
I mean, that would be
Like,
easy
I'm just not gonna.
in that example you gave. But imagine, like, if I, for instance, went by she/her pronouns.
Sure.
How you would have to do this cognitive override of like, you
Yeah.
see me, and in 100, 200 milliseconds, your brain is like, that's a male.
Well,
But you have to override that.
And that's why, like, if we're allowed to be close friends because I'm being deeply respectful to your wishes, I could then ask, like, is it all right with you if I think a different thing in my head when I'm saying she? Is it okay if I say...
You're like, I'm emphasizing the last two
But in my
letters of that
head, I'm
word.
thinking like he.
Yeah, right.
But like,
And
I'll
it-
say she for you
The S
because
is
I
silent in
respect
my
you.
head, yeah.
Yeah. And then I can like ask, like, is that something that you're okay with knowing that I just do? And then you can be like, yeah, I'm okay with you doing that, even though whatever. And then I'd be like, okay.
I would say, based on my understanding of trans psychology, that if someone asks to go by she, it means they have strong feels about it.
Sure.
And they wouldn't want you to know. Well, they wouldn't want to know that you think of them as their birth sex.
They wouldn't want to know.
They wouldn't want to know that. You wouldn't want to say, is it all right if I think of you that way? Because that's saying, I am thinking of you that way. You know?
Well, like, I feel like I've had this discussion with my trans friends, and they've just been like, but I haven't recorded any, obviously. Probably should, but I don't think I've ever had a. I don't know. What do you think about all that?
Which part of it?
Yeah, I don't think the title analogy works. That's more of a social construct thing. The pronouns,
It's an honorific, though. There's some overlap.
yeah,
there.
pronouns are just biological in my mind. They're biological shorthands.
Sure. I also just like personally think we might live in a better world if we weren't like gendering each other all the time while we're speaking all the time. Like, do we need to, what benefit is there anyway for doing that like all the time, other than just to like help narrow down like who we're talking about?
Yeah, no, I see the point. It'd be cool if we had a little more leeway with gender in society where we cared about it less. And,
Yeah.
And it mattered less. But there's also that whole millions of years of evolution that have hardwired that thinking into our brains.
Right.
So how much can we undo with social rules?
Right. And I'm not asking us to change the English language. I'm just saying, like, I want personally my identity to be really small.
What is your identity?
Ideally, I want a small identity. I strive for a small identity.
That's very feminine of you.
Oh, thank you.
That's just a joke because women are smaller. I'm not saying that they have
Okay.
smaller identities. Just want to say that for the record. Women are superior. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that we cleared there.
Well, cool, Phil. That was great. Thank you for the conversation. Great stuff. I think we'll have many more in the future, and we'll potentially collaborate on some stuff with Pete at some point.
Glad you two
Cool.
met.
Yeah.
That's really exciting. And good luck with the book. Oh, the book.
Yeah, plug.
Are you allowed to talk about that?
plug whatever you want.
So I have a book coming out. It's called Autoheterosexual, Attracted to Being the Other Sex. It explains the most common type of transgenderism. So if you have the gender feelies and you're wondering, am I trans? This is probably the answer, and you should buy it. You can find me on Twitter at Autogynephilic. You can go to autoheterosexual.com. But basically, you just Google autoheterosexual, and basically no one else is using that word. You'll find me.
Awesome. And Nathan.
Sweet. Yeah. Just YouTube channel Abstract Activist. Otherwise, go to streetepistemology.com. Just do it. Check it out.
Yes.
Check out the course that we're working on.
Fill out the
Everything
survey.
like that. Fill out the survey with a
Right on.
friend. It doesn't work on your own.
Yep. Sure do.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for watching, guys. Later.
See ya.